نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. My respected brothers and elders in Islam, the birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam changed the history of humanity forever. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam coming into this world firstly completed the link, the last link in the chain of prophethood. And therefore is called Khatamun Nabiyyin, the seal of prophethood. So the birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam firstly was the link that completed the entire chain of nubuwah, of prophethood. Secondly, the birth of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam also meant that the deen that started from the time of Nabi Adam alayhi salatu wassalam will now reach its perfection and completion. And therefore Allah says, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum deenakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati. I have completed my favor upon you, my favor, and perfected the deen for you. So the birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam meant that the religion, the message of Allah that started with the Adam alayhi salatu wasalam now reached its perfection. The birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam also meant that the ummah will now be redefined. Till now, the ummah of the various anbiya were defined by family or by locality. A Nabi was sent to a particular family, to the Banu Israel, or to a particular locality. Now Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam came, and the meaning and the definition of ummah changed, and Allah says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, that we're sending you, O Prophet of Allah, as a mercy for the entire humanity. So there were no, geographical bounds, no ethnicity, etc. that defines the ummah of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam also meant that this was the beginning of the end. He was the last Nabi. No other Nabi will come after him. And this is the first major sign of the end of time, or the end of this world as we know it. The birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam also meant that after an approximate absence of 600 years from the last Nabi, Allah was now bringing the seal and the crown of all humanity into this world. The birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam also meant that the best human being ever created by Allah, the most perfect and most beloved human being to ever grace the shores of this earth, was now about to make his entrance into this world. Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu says, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Inna Allah khalaq al-khalq. Allah created the entire creation. فَاخْتَارَ مِنَ الْخَلْقِ بَنِي Adam. And He chose a special place for humanity within His entire creation. Whether it was the animal creation, the jinn, the angels, the vegetation, from the entire creation, Allah chose humanity as His preferred creation. وَاخْتَارَ مِنْ بَيْنِ آدَمَ الْعَرَبِ. And Allah chose from the entire humanity, Allah chose the Arabs as the preferred race. وَاخْتَارَ مِنَ الْعَرَبِ مُضَرٍ. And from the Arabs He chose a particular clan, the clan of Mudar. And وَاخْتَارَ مِنْ مُدَرْ قُرَيْشٍ. And from the tribe of Mudar He chose a particular family, and that is the family of the Quraysh. وَاخْتَارَ مِنْ قُرَيْشٍ بَنِي هَاشِمٍ. And from the family of the Quraysh, Allah chose the Banu Hashim, the offspring of Hashim, as the most sublime of all humanity. وَاخْتَارَ مِنْ بَنِي هَاشِمٍ. And وَاخْتَارَنِي مِنْ بَنِي هَاشِمٍ. And from Bani Hashim, He chose me as the single most sublime human being. فَأَنَا مِنْ خِيَارٍ إِلَى خِيَارٍ. So I am the best from among the best. So the birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam meant or set the stage for the most sublime, most noble creation from among the entire creation of Allah to make His entrance and debut onto the world scene. Now, before Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam was born, there were lots of events that took place preparing for His entry into the world. And we are going to go through some of the events that took place prior to the birth of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, events that took place when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was conceived, events that took place when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Amina bore Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam during her pregnancy, and three events that took place just when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was born. The first most significant event was a dream that Abdul Muttalib had long before the birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He says, "Kunna nasma'u." The dream of Abdul Muttalib has been narrated by Abu Talib, his son, one of his sons. He says, "Bayna ana na'imun fil hajri." Says Abdul Muttalib says, long before the birth of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whilst I was sleeping within the precincts of the Kaaba, ra'aytu ru'ya halatni. I saw a dream that terrified me. فَفَزِعْتُ مِنْهَا فَزْعًا شَدِيدًا. I became worried. I became very, very anxious after seeing that dream. فَأَتَيْتُ كَاهِنَةَ قُرَيْشٍ. So I went to the Kahin, the fortune teller or the priestess of the Quraysh. She was the one people would turn to for advice. فَقُلْتُ لَهَا. And I told her that إِنِّي رَأَيْتُ اللَّيْلَةَ كَأَنَّ شَجَرَةً نَبَتَتْ. I've seen last night in my dream this tree that was germinating, that was growing. قَدْ نَالَ رَأْسُهَا السَّمَاءِ. The top of this tree reached the skies. وَضَرَبَ بِأَغْصَانِهَا الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. And the branches of this tree reached from the east to the west. وَمَا رَأَيْتُ نُورًا أَظْهَرَ مِنْهَا. And I have not seen a light more splendid than the light emanating from this tree. أَعْظَمْ مِنْ نُورِ الشَّمْسِ سَبْعِينَ ضِعْفًا. The brilliance of this light was 70 times more powerful than the light of the sun. وَرَأَيْتُ الْعَرَبْ وَالْعَجَمْ سَاجِدِينَ. And I saw the entire humanity, both the Arabs and the non-Arabs, prostrating before this tree. وَهِيَ تَزْدَادُ كُلَّ سَاعَةٍ عَظْمًا وَنُورًا وَارْتِفَاعًا. And I saw this light increasing in splendor, in its reach, by the moments. سَاعَةً تَخْفَى وَسَاعَةً تَظْهَرُ. And I also noticed something strange, that this light would appear for a while, and then disappear, and then reappear. وَرَأَيْتُ رَهْتَ قُرَيْشٍ قَدْ تَعَلَّقُوا بِأَغْصَانِهَا. And I saw a particular tribe from among the Quraysh hanging onto these branches that were extending between the east and the west. وَرَأَيْتُ قَوْمًا مِنْ قُرَيْشٍ يُرِيدُونَ قَطْعَهَا. And another segment, another part of Quraysh were trying to saw off this tree, trying to destroy the tree. فَإِذَا دَنَوْا مِنْهَا. And when this group that was trying to saw off this tree came near, أَخَذَهُمْ شَابٌ. Suddenly a youth appeared. لَمْ أَرَ قَطُّ أَحْسَنَ مِنْهُ وَجْهًا. I have not seen someone with features more beautiful than this youth. And وَلَا أَطْيَبَ مِنْهُ رِيحًا. Neither did I smell a perfume more sweeter and more beautiful than the perfume that was coming from this youth. فَيَكْسِرُ أَظْهَرَهُمْ وَيَقْلِعُ أَعْيُنَهُمْ. This youth then broke the rear guard, the guard of this group that was trying to break this tree. And I saw him gouging out the eyes of these people trying to break this tree. And he said, in this dream I'm standing and I'm looking at this, totally perplexed. فَرَفَعْتُ يَدِي لِأَتَنَاوُلَ مِنْهَا نَصِيبًا. So I lifted my hands to maybe get something off this tree. فَلَمْ أَنَلْ. But I could not take anything out of this tree. فَقُلْتُ. So I asked in my dream, لِمَنِ النَّصِيبُ. Who has the good fortune of actually benefiting from the fruits of this tree? فَقَالَ النَّصِيبُ لِهَؤُلَاءِ الَّذِينَ تَعَلَّقُوا بِهَا وَسَبَقُوكَ إِلَيْهَا. That the good fortune is for those who are hanging onto the branches of this tree. They have preceded you to it, O Abdul Muttalib. He says, فَانْتَبَحْتُ مَذْعُورًا فَزِعًا. I got up petrified, very alarmed. And he says, when I have narrated this dream, فَرَأَيْتُ وَجْهَ الْكَاهِنَ قَدْ تَغَيَّرَ. I saw the face of this priestess changing. And ثُمَّ قَالَتْ. She then said, صَدَقَتْ رُؤْيَاكَ. That your dream is undoubtedly true. لَيَخْرُجَنَّ مِنْ صُلْبِكَ رَجُلٌ. A man is going to come from your progeny, O Abdul Muttalib. يَمْلِكُ الْمَشْرِقَ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. Whose authority will spread to the east and to the west. وَيَدِينُ لَهُ النَّاسِ. And mankind would all submit to him at some point. So Abdul Muttalib used to say, ثُمَّ قَالَ لِأَبِي طَالِبٍ. He thought that this person that the dream was referring to was Abu Talib. لَعَلَّكَ أَن تَكُونَ هَذَا الْمَوْلُدِ. That perhaps you will be this young man to change the surface, to control the world. فَكَانَ أَبُو طَالِبْ يُحَدِّثُ بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ. Abu Talib used to narrate this hadith, and he says, وَالنَّبِيُّ قَدْ خَرَجَ whilst Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had then appeared as a Nabi, and you would say, كانت الشجر والله أبا القاسم الأمين. I swear that that tree was no other than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فيقال له. So people came to Abu Talib, if you're so convinced of this dream, and if you're so convinced that that tree represented Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, أَلَا تُؤْمِن بِهِ, will you then not believe in him? Why don't you believe in him, Abu Talib? فَيَقُولُ السِّبْتُ وَالْعَارِ السِّبْتَةُ وَالْعَارِ. He says, I feared this grace of my community, and therefore I would not believe in the mission of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So that was the first, or one of the first major events, before the birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, prophesying the advent of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. There were certain physical events that took place before his birth. First, one of them was that the well of Zamzam was uncovered. Now we know the history of Zamzam. The well appeared on the surface of the earth during the time of Ismail and Hajra alayhimus salatu wassalam. That well in the middle of the desert then attracted communities to come and reside around the well. The last community that was staying there at the foot of Mount Safa and Marwa was the tribe of Jurhum. But they were at war with several other tribes, and they were forced then to relocate. So at that point, they first covered the well up, so the enemies don't get hold of this well. They covered the well up, ensuring that no one will find this well. And then they left the locality. After they left the locality, before the birth of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, hundreds of years have now passed. The well remains uncovered, undetected, not used. Abu Talib then sees a dream for 4 consecutive nights. On the first night, he's told of a name of the well. And he wakes up and he says, he can't make much of what he sees. On the second night, he sees again a dream telling him, dig a well. But he still can't find the well. On the third night, he sees the same thing, that, oh, Abu Abdul Muttalib, you have to dig that well. And on the fourth night, he's told that, oh, Abu Talib, go and dig the well of Zamzam, and this is its location. So he'd then been told at that stage where the well was located. So the next morning he goes. At that time he had one son by the name of Haris. He starts digging. The rest of the people of Makkah are amazed. They think what are you doing? He says, no, I'm digging for a well. He says, in the middle of the desert, you digging for a well? He says, yes, I've been directed to dig and search for this well. Eventually, he uncovers the well of Zamzam as a prelude to the entry of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam into the world. But when he was digging the well, he took a vow, because there was no one to help him. He took a vow that if Allah gives me children, sons, I will sacrifice one of them to the idols. That was his vow. So now there was huge dispute when the well was discovered, because everyone wanted to lay claim to it. And after a mediated settlement, Abdul Muttalib was made the custodian of the well of Zamzam. However, when Allah then blessed Abdul Muttalib with 10 sons and 6 daughters. From his 10 sons, Abbas radiallahu an, Hamza radiallahu an, and Safiya radiallahu anha became Muslim. What happened? The Islam of the others is not known, but these 3 children embraced Islam. And when the children became of age, Abdul Muttalib was reminded of the vow that he took to appease the gods. And this vow, the pledge, despite all the illnesses of the Arabs, they never broke their word. They never broke an undertaking or commitment they made either to a fellow human being or to their gods. This was one of their unique specialities of the Arabs. Now it was time for him to sacrifice one of his sons. So he drew lots. Which one of his sons is he going to sacrifice? And the name of Abdullah came out, who's going to be the father of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He had to now sacrifice Abdullah. Abdullah was very, very beloved, not only to Abdul Muttalib, but to the entire Quraysh. People couldn't believe that Abdullah had now to be sacrificed. Eventually they advised Abdul Muttalib that go back to the Kahin and ask her advice. Is there any way out? So she advised that yes, there is a way out. Put a camel there and put Abdullah here. And draw a lot. If the name of Abdullah comes, you have to add 10 camels. If the name of the camel comes out, you slaughter the camel. So he drew the lot. The first time he drew the lot, the name of Abdullah came out. In other words, he now had to add 10 camels on this side. He repeated it. Again, the name of Abdullah came out. He did it 10 times. 100 camels were on the side. After the 10th time, he threw the lot again, and it came in favor of the camels, but he wasn't sure. He tried again. After the 13th occasion, there were 130 camels on the side. And then he was told, okay, you have ransomed the life of Abdullah. Slaughter and sacrifice this 130 camels. That's like over 1 million rands today. And that is how the life of Abdullah was spared. And what is amazing and strange is that when the well was discovered the first time, Ismail alayhi salam had to be slaughtered. And a ram came down to save him. When the well was discovered for the second time, Abdullah had to be slaughtered. And he was ransomed by 130 camels. So this was another event that took place prior to the birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The third event, which took place approximately 50 days before the birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, was the massacre of the elephants. Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil. Where Abraha, who was the governor of Yemen, he noticed that the entire Arab world would flock to the Kaaba. The Kaaba was the central point in the life of the Arabs. He was in Yemen. He wanted to change focus, shift focus, and bring the people from the Arab Peninsula to Yemen. And that must become the capital. So he built this huge, magnificent temple in the hope that the Arabs will be attracted to it compared to the very unassuming structure of the Kaaba, simple brick. He built this temple, embellished it with gold and silver, and said, this is the new Kaaba. This is where the entire Arab world should be coming. But the Arabs simply refused. They were so angered by this call of Abraha that one of them came into this temple and urinated and defecated in the temple to show their abhorrence, to show how disliked this act and this call was. And this enraged Abraha, and he set forth with an army, some scholars say, of 8 elephants and a huge cavalry, infantry. And as he came near the Kaaba, the biggest elephant was named Mahmud. And inshallah, Maulana will give us a history of the entire incident next Sunday of this particular Ashabul Fil. Anyway, when these elephants came to near the proximity of the Kaaba, they refused to move forward. If they were directed to the right, they would move. If they were directed to the left, they would move. If they directed to the opposite direction, they would move. But they refused to move any forward towards the Kaaba. Abraha's idea was these elephants will destroy the Kaaba brick by brick. That was his vow. At that time, Allah sent these birds, small ababil, like sparrows, with 3 stones, 1 in the beak and 2 in the claws. And this came and circled this entire army, and they then dropped these pebbles, and these pebbles sliced apart everyone that it fell on. The animals were destroyed. Abraha, however, was spared, and on his return, while going back, he started losing limb by limb. He took a vow that he will destroy the Kaaba limb by limb, and here he was losing limb by limb till he finally perished. So that happened approximately 50 days prior to the birth of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we had some events that took place that the Jews were, the Jews had full knowledge of the various signs that will appear before the birth of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Hassan bin Thabit, who's called the poet of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says that inni la ghulam, I was a young man at that time, just reaching puberty. Ibn Sab'i Sinin or Thaman. I was around 7 or 8 years old. And I can still remember, he says, that a certain Jew ran to the top of the mountain and said, Ya ma'ashara Yahud. He called all the Jews of Medina. فَاجْتَمَعُوا إِلَيْهِ. They all assembled. And he says, وَأَنَا أَسْمَعُ. I could hear what he's telling them. See, I was a young boy. And they said, قَالُوا وَيْلَكَ مَالَكَ. He says, woe unto you. Why have you assembled us? Because that was the norm. Whenever there was a very, very important decision to be announced, they would climb the mountain, summon everybody, and make the announcement. So you better have something really good to tell us if you have summoned us here. So he says, Tala'a Najmu Ahmad. He says, do you not know that a particular star will appear that would foretell the birth of Ahmad? He says, I have seen that particular star appearing last night, which prophesizes the arrival of the final Nabi. So that was the appearance of the star. Then you had the falling of the stars. There's a hadith narrated by Uthman bin Abi al-As radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He says, Haddathatni ummi, that my mother told me that annaha shahidat wiladatu Amina, umma Rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That she says, I witnessed the birth when Amina gave birth to Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Qalat, she says, فَمَا شَيْءٌ أَنظُرُ إِلَيْهِ فِي الْبَيْتِ إِلَّا نُوِّرَ. Suddenly, the night that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was born, she says, I was there was nothing in the house except there was a nur coming out from everything in the house. And وَإِنِّي لَأَنظُرُ إِلَى النُّجُومِ. And I used to look at the stars, تَدْنُ, falling down, حَتَّى أَنِّي لَأَقُولُ, so much so that I would say that these stars are going to hit me, they're going to fall on me. And she says, فَلَمَّا وَضَعَتْ خَرَجَ مِنْهَا نُورٌ. When she eventually gave birth, a nur emanated from her. أَضَاءَ لَهُ الْبَيْتِ وَالدَّارِ. All the houses and the abodes there suddenly experienced this light. حَتَّى جَعَلْتُ لَا أَرَى إِلَّا نُورًا. So much so that you could see nothing but nur. Wherever you saw nur. So this was another sign that referred to the falling stars. Remember that till the advent of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the shayateen used to go to the first heaven and listen to what the angels were discussing. They would come back and then inform the fortune tellers about it. But from the birth of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the shayateen were then prevented from frequenting the first heaven. And every time they came, a star would repel them and drive them away. So here, the birth of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam meant that the shayateen were now repelled from the first kind. So these were some of the experiences before the birth of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Amina herself says, the mother of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, لَقَدْ رَأَيْتُ لَيْلَةَ وَضَعْتُهُ نُورًا. I saw, when I gave birth to Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, I saw a light emanating from me. أَضَاعَتْ لَهُ قُصُورَ الشَّامِ. That illuminated up to the palaces in Syria. I could see, this nur illuminating the places right up to Syria. Now let us go to the time of conception. What happened? Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu says, كان من دلالات حمل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. One of the signs that indicated the conception, that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was conceived in the womb of his mother, was that night when that conception took place. It says, أن كل دابة كانت لقريش نطقت تلك الليلة. That all the animals that the Quraysh owned were given the power of speech that night. They started speaking that night, and they started spreading the good news of the conception of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, wa Rabbil Kaaba wa huwa amanu dunya wa siraju ahliha. He is going to be the security for this world and the lantern for this world. And so that was one. Two, وَلَمْ تَبْقَ كَاهِنَ فِي قُرَيْشٍ. No fortune teller amongst the Quraysh, وَلَا فِي قَبِيلَةٍ مِّن قَبَائِلِ الْعَرَبِ. Neither was there a fortune teller amongst the rest of the Arab tribes, إِلَّا حُجِبَتْ عَنْ صَاحِبَتِهَا وَانْتُزِعَ عِلْمُ الْكَهْنَةِ مِنْهَا. They were kind of isolated from the rest, and the knowledge of the sorcery suddenly disappeared. They were unable to practice their fortune telling for that period of time. And وَلَمْ يَبْكَ سَرِيرُ مَلَكٍ مِّن مُلُوكِ الدُّنْيَا. And no throne from among the thrones of this world remained إِلَّا أَصْبَحَ مَنْكُوسًا, except that they overturned that night. And it is said that among the major signs was that the idols around the Kaaba, the 360 idols around the Kaaba, all fell down. And the palace of the king in Iran, which was a fortified palace, suddenly there appeared 14 pillars of that palace cracked and fell down. Together with that, at that time there were the Zoroastrians, the fire worshippers. And the fire worshippers had a fire, they worshipped fire. So the fire was ignited, burnt continuously for 1,000 years without fail. On that night, the fire extinguished. And they tried hard to light the fire, but they failed to light the fire at that time. So it says, وَمَرَّتْ وَحْشَ الْمَغْرِبِ إِلَى وَحْشَ الْمَغْرِبِ بِالْبَشَارَاتِ. And the beasts from the east started giving glad tidings to the beasts on the west. The animal kingdom began rejoicing when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was conceived. وَكَذَلِكَ أَهْلُ الْبِحَارِ يُبْشِرُ بَعْضُهُمْ بَعْضًا. And likewise were the creatures in the seas giving glad tidings to one another. And لَهُ فِي كُلِّ شَهْرٍ مِّن شُهُورِهِ نِدَاءٌ. And every month from the time of conception, a announcement would be made in the earth, وَنِدَاء فِي السَّمَاءِ, and in the skies, and أَبْشِرُوا, that, rejoice. فَقَدْ آن لِأَبِي الْقَاسِمِ أَن يَخْرُجَ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. Because it is time that Abu Qasim, that is the name of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is about to come and grace this world. So the animal kingdom, the marine life, deep in the seas, all rejoiced at the conception of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's the first. The second was during the pregnancy. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu says, وَبَقِيَ فِي بَطْنِ أُمِّهِ تِسْعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ كَمْلًا. That he stayed for 9 months. He completed the entire term. لَا تَشْكُوا وَجْعًا. His mother complained of no pain. وَلَا رِيحًا. No any discomfort on account of wind. No any kind of hardship that generally a pregnant woman would experience at the time of pregnancy. وَهَلَكَ أَبُوهُ عَبْدُ اللَّهِ وَهُوَ فِي بَطْنِ أُمِّهِ. His father Abdullah passed away whilst he was still in the womb of his mother. فَقَالَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. The Malaika, when they saw that Abdullah passed away, turned to Allah and said, إِلَهَنَا وَسَيِّدَنَا, O our Allah and O our Master, بَقِيَ نَبِيُّكَ هَذَا يَتِيمًا. This Nabi, the final Nabi, is he going to come as a yatim without the protection of a father? فَقَالَ اللَّهُ, Allah said, أَنَا لَهُ وَلِيٌّ. I shall be his protector. وَلِي وَحَافِظٌ. And I shall guard him. وَنَصِيرٌ. And I shall be his aid. وَتَبَرَّكُوا بِمَوْلِدِهِ. And take glad tidings with his birth. And Ibn Abbas says, وَفَتَحَ اللَّهُ لِمَوْلِدِهِ أَبْوَابَ السَّمَاءِ وَجِنَانَهُ. Allah opened the doors of the heavens and the doors of paradise in honor of his arrival. فَكَانَتْ آمِنَةُ تُحَدِّثُ عَنْ نَفْسِهَا. Amina used to talk about herself. وَتَقُولُ, and she says, أَتَانِي آتٍ حِينَ مَرَّ بِي حَمْلُهُ سِتَّةُ أَشْهُرٍ. That after 6 months, a person came to me. فَوَكَزَنِي بِرِجْلِهِ فِي الْمَنَامِ. And he poked me or woke me up with his feet in my dream. وَقَالَ لِي, and told me, يَا آمِنَةَ, O Amina, إِنَّكَ قَدْ حَمَلْتِ بِخَيْرِ الْعَالَمِينَ تُرًّا. That you are bearing and carrying the best of all human beings ever created. And when you give birth to him, فَسَمِّيهِ مُحَمَّدًا, call him, give him the name Muhammad. فَكَانَتْ تُحَدِّثُ عَنْ نِفَاسِهَا. She used to talk about, she says, I didn't even realize I was pregnant till then. The only concern I had was my menstrual cycle stopped. And I was worried, why did my menstrual cycle stop? I at least realized that I was carrying him in my belly. And no one till that point knew that I was pregnant. And as the time came near, I suddenly heard an alarming disturbance, which frightened me. فَرَأَيْتُ كَأَنَّ جَنَاحَ طَيْرٍ أَبْيَضٍ. I saw the like of the wing of a white bird passing over my heart, like feathers, soothing my heart. And when that happened, فَذَهَبَ عَنِّي كُلُّ رُعْبٍ وَكُلُّ وَجَعٍ. That all fright that I had and all the pain that I had, whatever pain I had, disappeared. ثُمَّ الْتَفَتَ فَإِذَا أَنَا ثُمَّ الْتَفَتُّ. I turned around, and behold, I was presented with what looked like pure milk. And I was extremely thirsty. So I took this milk and I فَشَرِبْتُهَا, and I drank this milk. فَأَضَاءَ مِنِّي نُورٍ. And this, as a result of that, this nur started coming out from me. ثُمَّ رَأَيْتُ. Then I saw women who were as tall as palm trees, as if they were the daughters of Abdi Manaf. They encircled me. And whilst I was, in that state of amazement, I suddenly saw a silk, white silk, that came down from the skies to the earth. وَإِذَا بِقَائِلٍ يَقُولُ. And I heard a person saying, خُذُوهُ مِنْ أَعْيُنِ النَّاسِ, conceal him from the eyes of people. And قالت وَرَأَيْتُ رِجَالًا, and I saw men who were standing in mid-air, and in their hearts were silver jugs. And I saw a flight of birds enter my room and covered the entire room. مَنَاقِيرُهَا, their beaks were made from emeralds, and their wings were made look like rubies. فَكَشَفَ اللَّهُ عَنْ بَصَرِي. At that time, that was just prior to me giving birth, Allah removed the veils from my eye. وَأَبْصَرْتُ تِلْكَ السَّاعَةَ مَشَارِقَ الْأَرْضِ وَمَغَارِبَهَا. At that time, I could see the horizons of the east and west of the entire globe. And وَرَأَيْتُ ثَلَاثَةَ أَعْلَامٍ مَضْرُوبَاتٍ, and I saw 3 flags being erected. One fil mashriq, one in the east, one in the west, and one on top of the Kaaba. And she says, from that point onwards, I went into labor. فَأَخَذَنِي الْمَخَاض فَوَلَدْتُ مُحَمَّدًا. And I eventually gave birth to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. فَلَمَّا خَرَجَ مِنْ بَطْنِي, when he came out of my womb, from my belly, نَظَرْتُ إِلَيْهِ, I glanced, I looked at him. فَإِذَا أَنَا بِهِ سَاجِدًا, behold, I saw him in sajda. وَقَدْ رَفَعَ أُصْبُعَيْهِ, and his finger was lifted like someone very deep in ibadah. ثُمَّ رَأَيْتُ سَحَابَةً بَيْضَاءَ, the minute I gave birth to him, a cloud descended from above. And حَتَّى غَشِيَتْهُ, until this cloud covered this newborn child. فَغِيبَ عَنْ وَجْهِي, I lost sight of him. وَسَمِعْتُ مُنَادِيًا يُنَادِي, and I heard a proclaimer calling out, طُوفُوا بِمُحَمَّدٍ شَرْقَ الْأَرْضِ وَغَرْبَهَا, take Muhammad to the east and the west of the globe. وَأَدْخِلُوهُ الْبِحَارَ, and submerge him into the depths of the ocean. لِيَعْرِفُوهُ بِاسْمِهِ وَنَعْتِهِ وَصُورَتِهِ, so the entire creation could recognize him by his name, by his features, and by his character. And so that they may know that he is called the Mahi, the obliterator, for he is going to obliterate and wipe out shirk from the surface of this earth. ثُمَّ تَجَلَّتْ عَنْهُ, and then this cloud suddenly disappeared. فَإِذَا أَنَا بِهِ, and behold, I was holding him. He was wrapped in a white woolen cloth, and beneath that woolen cloth was silk that was green in color. And I noticed, وَقَدْ قَبَضَ عَلَى ثَلَاثَةِ مَفَاتِيحٍ مِّن لُؤْلُؤٍ, and he was holding keys made from pearls in his hand. And فَإِذَا قَائِلٌ يَقُولُ, and behold, a proclaimer said that Muhammad holds in his hands the keys to the help of Allah, the keys to the winds, and the keys to the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The keys to Nubuwah. ثُمَّ أَقْبَلَتْ سَحَابَةٌ أُخْرَى. That was the one experience. And that cloud disappeared. Another cloud then came down. And I could hear the neighing of horses and the fluttering of wings, until the cloud came for ghiba an aini. Again, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was now covered. I could not see him. And then I heard a proclaimer calling, Tufu bi Muhammadin ash-sharq wal gharb. They take Muhammad again to the east and the west. Wa ala mawalidin nabiyyin. Take him to the birthplaces of all the Anbiya that were born and graced this world. And submerge him or introduce him to every living jinn and ins, every bird and beast. And then it was said, grant him Safa'a Adam. Grant him the purity and the innocence of Adam alayhi salam. Wa riqqata Nuh, and the gentleness of Nuh alayhi salam. Wa khullata Ibrahim, and the friendship of Ibrahim. Wa lisana Ismail, grant him the tongue of Ismail. Wa bushra Yaqub, the glad tidings of Yaqub. Wa jamala Yusuf, grant him the beauty of Yusuf. Wa sawta Dawood, grant him the voice of Dawood. Wa sabra Ayyub, grant him the sabr of Ayyub. Wa zuhda Yahya, grant him the zuhd, the abstinence of Yahya. Wa karama Isa, and the nobility of Isa alayhi salam. Now, in other words, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam became the embodiment of the character of all the Anbiya alayhi salatu wassalam. Eventually, that cloud then was lifted, and she says, and behold, I saw the presence of three individuals then. And fi yadi ahadihim, and in one of them had an ibriq, a jug made out of silver. The second person had a wash basin, a container made out of emeralds. And the third person had a silk, white color silk. They came, فَنَشَرَهَا, the person opened the silk, فَأَخْرَجَ مِنْهَا, and he took out from there something that looked like a ring. That ring, he says, was so brilliant in splendor that it could blind people that were around it. No one could withstand the splendor of that ring. And then, فَغَسَلَهُ مِنْ ذَلِكَ الْإِبْرِيقِ, they poured water from that container. They washed him 7 times. And then they took this ring and they placed it between his shoulder blades. That was the seal of prophethood. And then they wrapped him in this silk. One of the angels placed him under its wings. And eventually, ثُمَّ رَدَّهُ إِلَيَّ, then eventually I had the honor of holding this child, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So this was in brief, because there's lots of other incidents, but this briefly shows some of the events that took place at conception, during the pregnancy, and during the birth of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This is how the world was prepared to receive the master of all humanity, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi